Chilly here with Sirius Taurus Moon, and this is Mercury hour, Mars night. Mercury is ruling ascendant and midheaven. Ascendant close to Al-Qaid, midheaven, also 27 degrees, but Gemini. Moon at 12 degrees, Cancer. Mercury, 17 degrees. Aquarius separating from a conjunction with Venus. And Saturn, 28 degrees Pisces. Well, I feel like this energy reading is very needed for the themes that I see coming up um, around the world, whether it's to do with technologies, um, visible and invisible, um, occult related things, or mundane events. The frequency, okay, because Saturn adjoining Neptune has a lot about frequency and the structure of frequency. And I think one of the best contemplations one could have is where they have been while Saturn is still in Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter is retrograde in Cancer, the sign of nourishment. Where have we been limiting ourselves when it comes to our own rest, nourishment, sleep, um, benevolence toward ourselves? Because before the outer, okay, constraints um, show in people's lives, unless it's unless they have been infant, and in that it's about um, miraculous healing or being with the void, or the basic needs, whether relational needs, secure attachment, um, tender care, care that is not control, but actual care. And the combination of both of those is basically coming up to tell us, where have people been needing to rest and not, how should I say that, not go overboard when it comes to the working environment? I think about the time where Saturn conjoined Pluto and Jupiter, and it was the great Jupiter resignation. And this is where Saturn is ruling resigning, rest. Um, it more than it rules slavery, it rules the Sabbath, which basically means the day of rest, and um, and the question is, where have people, or each and every individual can ask themselves, where have they been kind of enslaving themselves, whether it is to others, whether it is, and again, I'm not talking about being narcissistic. I'm talking about the very needed rest that allows actual growth, actual coming to fruition, actual birthing of something that stands the test of time and is benevolent. I hear people um, dealing within themselves in situations where, let's say, they did everything for others at work, but they were mistreated. And then something technological happens. Now, there are sometimes even those very Zen like situations where we need to understand what within correlated with something external that was never on the frequency of love, and to purge that, which means no, we do not take the blame for the offenses of others. And we learn to discern what was on that frequency of that offense, so we do not cooperate with that frequency. Okay, a free person needs not oppress another, regardless of gender, origin, bloodline, and so on and so forth. Which means that if somebody is oppressing another, they're not a free person. And if somebody runs into oppression, they need to discern what is that frequency. For example, I'm dealing with recovering from toenail fungi, which of course affects our teeth as well, because it's basically caries. And that's something that has been there. And then as I treat my teeth and my toes, I see, well, my toes have been in a very weird structure. And my teeth are not as straight as I thought they were. So the structure of the bones is basically affecting blood flow, which affected the tendency for something to go fungal, which of course affects the nervous system, the thyroid, the internal organs, and so on and so forth, the heart. And then I say, well, isn't that isn't that interesting that at this time where the structure of the fundamentals of the world are changing, I'm tending to realign the structures of the fundamental of my own bone structure. Then I realized I was born in 1984, and I think there was nothing special around that. I look at that year and I see, well, there was something like a Chernobyl going all the way from India. There was, yeah, all types of rebellion and many things that I am and the many people that were born that year are a walking talisman of radiation. Neptune in Saturn sign, radiation that can affect the bone structure, a frequency of helplessness that can affect of the children that were sex trafficked, that can affect babies and infants on a conscious level, the invisible making very weird things going completely under the radar because no loving parent think that their child is dealing with something that they can't see, and the child doesn't speak about it and can affect upbringing, life energy, and so on and so forth. So definitely one thing that I tended to the topic of removing the mold or removing the fungal structures, but it's also about aligning the structure so that it can hold a foundation. Saturn Neptune in 0 degree Aries is the structure that can hold a foundation, the structure that can be the foundation to the world. I saw a beautiful video explaining World War I as basically a fight over a railway system through the Middle East towards China. Same topic as there is today, but then the question is the energy of oil and gas that they wanted to transport there compatible as a foundation for the world? Again, I'm not saying it is or it isn't. It's just an open ended question of what are the foundations that can really be foundations to the world? What are the structures that can be foundational and can stand the test of time without eroding, molding? And I noticed that if the Egyptians built the pyramids to get gnosis, to get insight from the gods or from the stars, and they got the 6 9, which is basically associated with the star Sirius and ISIS, not the terror movement or the intelligence, but actually the notion of male and female aligned within oneself, the rays of Kundalini energy, which is basically rest and expansion and contraction, relaxed arousal. It's antithetical to rape. So the Egyptians built all these pyramids, and then afterwards they had to let their people go, let the slaves go, because, and also these slaves, they gained the ability to make it costly for the Egyptians to enslave, basically. So all that beautiful pyramid to show us that slavery is not needed, and that what is the yin yang relaxed arousal is basically orgasmic birthing. In a world that is of zero slavery, there is also zero sex trafficking, and there is also zero rape because nobody thinks that anybody owned them sex or their life energy or their soul. And in such a world, birth is orgasmic. So that alone can be a structure that is holding foundations that stand the test of time. It's antithetical to what the Egyptians probably thought when they built the pyramids And yet that gnosis was a very obvious gnosis that the 6-9 is not for the elite to have these secret gnosis that only the elite knows, but actually for the common people. And the people born without genitals, so that is still holding in the sense of rest and work. I don't know how does it work with experiencing the orgasmic self, because I know that orgasm is not linked to only the genitals, um, and yet I know that there were a lot of mutilations that were done on the genitals to try to enslave people. Residues of those, even in children, are basically crime against humanity for a reason. So, and yet I don't think that people that were born, let's say, without genitals, um, are lacking the ability to attune to a balance of rest and sleep versus um, contraction or aligning, whether it's the void or the inner shine within. If that was caused by, okay, certain experiments or certain projects, um, the things that apply, which means that those that do not go through trauma bonds creation by ritual abuse, kind of like have it better in the sense that I'm not saying they have it better, but um, they can attune with their sense of self and and growing into secure attachment, or even setting the intention to, um, is growing out of cult-like or trauma bonds with all the related issues. So definitely tending to anything moldy can assist, um, because it creates a movement where there was stagnation. Slavery creates movement. Slavery creates stagnation. Okay, what happens to enslaved people? They get typhus, they get inflammation, they die, they manifest megalithic disasters. Um, um, and when we think about solutions, when the more people have been misaligned, the more rest they need, the more nourishment they need, the more unconditional love frequency they need, not compatible with the outside world that wonders what can they do about this, where a lot of the answers are found in ease rather than in constraint. Because we don't vacay enough, then people normally don't have their own yacht. Then that scope where people do have their yacht or their mansion or their island is stagnant and is polluted with child trafficking, with slavery, with all kinds of things that are creating nuclear energy leak, mold, okay? Even when it came, I think it was some Egyptian kings that had herbs from all over the world, but their floors were dirty. And I can attest that tending to one's own hygiene, particularly in an environment where there are all kinds of, is indeed challenging. If the structure has gone, or if a child was born with a structure that is misaligned, that affects the blood flow, that child will not be able to do what other people do, and that child will have to spend a lot of time on aligning basically the structure of the bones so that the blood can flow, so that it can ease on those structures that become moldy, that become stagnant. And it takes a lot of tending to by design. So the people that are outside, they need to ask themselves, where has something been moldy, whether in the house or in the body, um, where they have been working in an environment that is not compatible with life, that is on the frequency of slavery and enslaving. Even raising awareness, even if they can't do anything now, even tending to it and holding a little bit of space between the thoughts for solutions to arise. Those terrifying things that are in the world, first of all, they begin to leak. Okay? Um, it's not that they weren't before, it's just they have become such a big problem that it is visible. And for example, if I think about fungi, okay, years before we see something like atlas food or caries, the fungi is forming in the body. And now, once we can see that, tending to that removes what is stagnant. And with Neptune, with Saturn Neptune, it's a holistic perspective. So, for example, when Saturn was in my 12th house, I had asked myself, well, when it comes to my dwelling, um, I began to recall the conditions that created the stagnations in my life around, let's say, housing or even traveling. And many dreams that I do have. Remember, if people are wondering, oh, there are people detained here and there, even children. one could look for the solution in that particular place, or one can watch a travel video and then there are yachts there. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. Those children that we think are there are actually there. But if we don't allow ourselves to take the space of thought, we don't form the creative connections, the clarity of the picture. If we, how should I say that? It's the fact that the common people haven't been around the super yachts, around the islands, that creates that stagnation, that mold, where the people that have been there in very moldy conditions. And this is perhaps a calling to ask oneself, where have we not been asking enough for ourselves? Not on the not from a perspective of enslaving or harming others, because there is no truth, there is no essence of joy. There is a momentary fleeting illusion of power until one finds out that they were filmed, that that child had a handler, and that the entire thing was a setup to extort them to do things that are against their own wishes, dreams, and desires, for which they joined whichever conglomerate. And of course, most were born within those conglomerates. Um, but there's a reason that they do invest in so much harm to children, and that reason is because something in the thread of the soul, alignment, the heart, um, is not on that trajectory. Okay, if there was a tremendous amount of energy needed to invest to create those things, then probably it's not the natural ebb and flow of the energy. Um, and those that did not have a trace to that, even in infanthood, might see it completely different because so much energy was invested so that the nature would be perceived as inverted. The primordial self is way less violent and abusive than we perceive it to be. No, ascendant ingress to Libra. Libra emphasizes here that the topic of people pleasing is opposed to the first decan of Aries. And this is where we will have to ask ourselves, because the how should I say that? The threat of people pleasing, of appeasing something, even if it is the gods, by the way. This is the core issue that needs to be resolved to get that sovereignty in the world for the global citizens or the global conglomerate of people. It requires for us, okay, it's basically Saturn opposing people pleasing, showing us that we can't have that sovereignty to stand the test of time with people pleasing. And it can even, with Saturn Neptune, I had a colleague, and he had a good teaching about Saturn moving into the first house. And he said, before Saturn even ingress, work on your fitness. And he did, to the bone, which he almost broke one. So, while this is absolutely great advice, um, Saturn reminds us, particularly in the sign of Mars. Saturn is bones, Mars is broken, so. Okay? So, particularly in the sign of Mars, um, Saturn reminds us that appeasing Saturn is not done just by hard work or enslaving oneself to superhuman conditions. Okay? And think about it also in astrological traditions. What astrological traditions see Saturn as work, slavery, poverty, and what astrological conditions see Saturn as rest, dedication, meditation? Both are Saturn. We can't climb a mountain running, okay? We can't climb a mountain running. Neptune with Aries works in a way that has an attunement. We set intention, we let it go. We set intention, we let it go. We dream with action. And it's also a quest to, hey, if all of our dreams can come true, why not dream the dream that we do want? And Neptune is the mystery because it can yield loss, but it's not something that we actually want. And then some miraculous healing can arrive in the void. For example, think about a dictator that wants to control all of the world, and then he kills everyone and he rules only sand. It's a great loss. But then there can be tremendous relief that he can let go of control. Does he have to kill everyone to do so? No, with Libra, the first decan, we don't even dare to dream the dream. Or we believe that we can, um, how should I say that? Well, there's a conversation, a family, a sibling had a conversation, and they needed to sit down on a contract, and they were really, really hoping that it will be on there in conditions that they can stand in. And then they were having the conversation, and everything went fine, and then they found themselves saying, "Oh, yeah, sweetheart, we'll." And I was like, "But I'm not even saying that. I'm not even talking like that." Okay. Now, I'm not saying that the kind word, um, when it's authentic, cannot do stuff when it's authentic. Flattery, when it's authentic, can do a lot. But I am saying that Saturn opposing this decan will, how should I say that? We might find that flattery doesn't get us all the way to do what we do want. With this, we might find that there is a limit to our diplomacy. And that limit has to do with our sovereignty. There are stories about what's the difference, I think it is between a Chinese and a Japanese woman. And I don't honestly remember which is which, but one of them is the very appeasing one, also intimately and so on and so forth. But then when the man is old and on a wheelchair, she drives him to the river, pushes him and say, bye bye. And then there is the other one, and she's never as squashing in any way, shape, or form, but she always makes sure this person is healthy, that they have all the needs, that they are taking care of themselves, um, that basically she cares for the well being of the person. But she's not, and I think that this anything that crosses the, or opposes that deacon of Libra kind of asks which which type of girl does one prefer? Because that lady that actually cares for the well-being of a person, she is there, but she's not going to harlot herself. And to be intimate with her, she's going to have to actually care for her well-being too, in and out of bed. Her dreams, her goals, her aspirations, her intellectual, her child self, her um, adult self is. If this woman is not a woman to ask her to have his children, it's children of themselves, and well, if the world needs to change so there can be orgasmic birthing. There was this lovely sketch about a couple that wants orgasmic birthing comes to the ER. And the way that the ER is, it created a sexual trauma rather than um, yes, the architecture, the real estate. Now here is the thing: if the world structure has been manufacturing so much leak, abuse, leak of radioactive stuff, um, detainment centers for children that are being told that they waste somebody's oxygen. And that's a real concern because they do think to sell air. And it begs the question now, Libra here is kind of like that woman is saying to a man very kind, you can be the most amazing man in the world. The minute you want to, I don't know, provide for the family, they will require you to be a part of an Epstein ring or something of that sort, or you can be the most amazing man in the world, but have your children, I would need to go to this ER that doesn't is not compatible with orgasmic water birth or something. Okay, I had a conversation with a Catholic man. Um, and um, yes, we liked each other, and he said, well, for me, all I care with ceremony of marriage is whatever you like, anything you like, just 5 minutes in the church. I have no problem with churches, but with Catholic marriage, I do have a problem. So this is okay. This is the type of Libra first deacon where we can't really consider, or there is a limit to our ability to be considerate. And that can prevent marriages and unions. However, sometimes the answer is exactly in the dream of what the desired reality is. Hey, to grow, children will have to be able to travel the world so that they will have a good life and see various places. And there are so many things when you're just in a place and you see, oh, Hawaii, oh, look there, that was Pearl Harbor. Or when you travel around Europe, what are these monuments? They are of the Great War. Oh, yes, Hitler. No, 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 no. The one before that. So the Great War is actually the first one. Or even around the canals, I'm like, people grow children here, yeah. But what if they drop in a canal? All of these children have been to the canal. That's how they learn. It's kind of scary. My dog has been to the canal as well. Yes, we traveled with two dogs to Netherlands. Um, that's something that no school can teach. This type of structure needs to be safe. There shouldn't be any concern that those children are trafficked. It shouldn't be a luxury. And here is the things. If the only couples that live like that do live like Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, it's a lot of stagnation. Would me and my partner be lonely in the islands? but yeah, no, like could you land a plane in those places that's not trafficky, but then you can't say doesn't participate in trafficking, but we'd have to pretend we're human traffickers to buy the children and get them away from there. Okay, that's how much stagnation, because even being child free is only halfway there, because sometimes people are child free and that's okay. And sometimes, like, well, what are the issue? Well, extortion calls, basically. Well, they're also the issue when it comes to living single. True. Before we talk about orgasmic birthing, are if people live in a place that they can really orgasm and not worry about the neighbors, can they actually, because they would worry about all kinds of weird things that are not theirs, where The doctor that's supposed to ensure us that none of us is carrying any weird disease has a framework that sees our orgasm as a liability because money is made by sex trafficking, which is reliant on my husband being secretly pedo. Which is supposed to create an intrigue between me and the children, so that they can take the children. It's just now dreaming without tending to our dreams doesn't raise the things that are the mold that needs to be dissolved, that needs to be tended to. Okay? Just like I was studying aromatherapy when we were studying about the holistic meaning of athlete's food. And I'm like, oh, so these amphetamines that are bothering with magnesium absorption also bother with absorption of other minerals, including what's supposed to heal my toenail fungi that affects also my nervous system. And okay, and that's just one layer. And then I begin to find out that it's actually difficult for me to tend to my toenails daily. And then things begin to bubble up, and then there is a neighbor that can't stand the smell and of the oils. And not only now I think about it, I don't think it was smelly feet, but smelly feet were okay. It's the oil that treats that that was stinky. Um, and then all kinds of things begin to happen, including COVID. And 2 weeks I'm in lockdown in my one room apartment, unable to freaking take the garbage down. And I realized that I do need a bigger apartment, and so on and so forth. Then I came to that, and I realized that there were forces that were against me treating anything moldy and fungal. I'm like, why? Because they needed my frequency to not be high. Because they do all kinds of soul trade things. And I'm like, I did not even know that those things exist. Let alone that some of my besties would be in it. Um, and then I realized the real cost of oil. And while everybody's investing in standard oil, I invest in essential oils. Okay, that's just what happened when I started to tend to something that I don't know to this day how old of an issue it was. within me. Um, and then I learned about all kinds of things to do with mind control or weird technologies or many things that actually related to my thesis. So, of the many, stagnations, as we begin to resolve, we see that the world is changing and what's been keeping us from begins to arise. And then we can tend to that because we understand that a free person needs not oppress another. So we can simply continue to remove what is moldy and dissolve it. And so more and more solutions begin to arise. And suddenly we have better ability to maintain hygiene. And then we run into another thing that has been obstructing. Okay, I learned to pick up the little crops that grow just naturally, and then I align the structure of my bones, and oh, my feet hurt. I walk all the way home, and then, oh, now I need to rest. Less ability to cook with those particular herbs. Oh, but oh, wait, there is an essential oil blend that actually helps that inflammation. What does it sit on? A lot of things that needed to release, let's say. I'll say I'm being able to rest a little bit more into myself. That's lovely, pleasurable even. And then more things arise that call me to make this episode because if you want to know where the children in the detaining centers are, um, that look for yachts more than prisons. There would also be the people that are making the decisions. Sometimes I'm worse than an orca, I know. And before the weird technology stuff happened, what happened when there was lockdowns? They installed